Welcome back to the latest episode of Kansas City's Northeast Newscast. As always, I'm your host, Paul Thompson, and I was joined this week by 3rd District, Kansas City, Missouri City Councilman Jermaine Reed. We talk about his connections to the Northeast, including as a graduate of Northeast High School, Kansas City Public Schools Superintendent Dr. Mark Bedell, and the job he's done with that district. Then we talk briefly about Black Panther, before discussing the city's Ban the Box legislation, which Reed championed. We also touch on the recently approved Memorandum of Understanding with Edgemoor for the construction of a new single-terminal airport at KCI, how the city should spend the 1/8 cent sales tax passed by voters in April 2017 for East Side economic development, the possibility of getting an Independence Avenue Max line, the latest regarding the Parks Department's organizational review of the American Jazz Museum, and finally, we talk about the economic development potential surrounding the Major League Baseball Urban Youth Academy, which was recently completed just outside of the 18th and Vine district. Without further ado, my conversation with 3rd District, Kansas City, Missouri Councilman Jermaine Reed. Thank you for listening. All right, it's Paul Thompson up at City Hall, sitting right next to Jermaine Reed, 3rd District Councilman. Thanks for taking the time today.
Well, thank you so much. It's always good to be able to chat with you and, of course, the folks who listen.
There we go.
As well.
Hopefully there's many of them in the Northeast.
Well, I can tell you, this one's going to break some records. So, yeah, it's going to be good.
We'll have to keep you updated.
We got a lot to discuss.
Now I'm feeling the pressure. Speaking of the Northeast, I just wanted to start right there because you obviously have deep ties to the Northeast community. As a graduate from Northeast High School, right?
Yeah, I graduated from high school, and Carl DeCapo would remind me to say you were the class president of Northeast High School.
Right, you got to put that feather in your cap. You got to let's remind people, right?
And we're here, so my office here, there's several pictures from actually graduating from high school and just in high school. You know, I remember picking Northeast from middle school because I went to J. Rogers from middle school.
So you had your choice?
Yeah, and at that time there was magnet school themes, and so Northeast was a law and public service, and so a lot of folks that were going there were thinking about going off to the military or things of that sort. And I at that time, as a young kid, thought perhaps I would be a lawyer or some type of public servant in some type of capacity, and go figure. Some now 20 years later, of course I am actually not 20 years because I graduated too.
Yeah, not quite 20 years. Yeah.
So I don't want to age myself too much just yet. Right. But that's the reason why. And probably one of the best decisions that I remember making as a youngster. And frankly, I mean, I ran track in school, and so the Cliff Drive area, we had to run over there. Independence Avenue, I probably shouldn't admit to this, but sometimes I would go out and have a lunch.
All right. Ooh, sneak out.
I didn't say sneak out. I said
I would go
out and have lunch.
Yeah. I would go eat lunch on Independence Avenue.
On the avenue.
Yeah. You don't have to say whether or not it was the weekday or the weekends, I guess. I didn't mean to infer otherwise.
And of course, just sometimes even taking public transportation to school. So yeah, definitely a lot of fond memories and great memories of Northeast, and my family lived not too far in a number of different neighborhoods in the Northeast, and so I don't live too far from there now.
Right, awesome. And have you followed the work that's being done in that district by Superintendent Mark Bedell and his staff?
Yeah, absolutely.
What do you think? I mean, based on where he's going, I would imagine that you take a little bit of a keen interest in seeing how KCPS is doing being a graduate from there.
Well, heck, let me just start from just building improvements at Northeast High School.
Right, that field.
And actually, if you go into the school, and if you haven't been there in a while, there's some emblems that hang, I think, the ground floor. And they're emblems that say 2002. And so when we graduated from Northeast, we wanted to represent what our class was all about,
right.
Pride and, Ben Vikings. My freshman year at Northeast, as we talk about just building improvements there, we didn't have air conditioning inside the school.
Really?
And so, freshmen, I don't think the entire time.
Right.
I mean, so sometimes we would have what they were called heat days. And so we wouldn't have class because it was too hot.
If it was
a heat day.
In September or that late August sometimes you get out?
Yeah.
Wow, funny.
And so yeah, but I mean, just from those basic improvements there, and of course the opening back up of the middle school, and the real leadership that Dr. Bedell has been able to provide to the school district has been something that I think all of us as a community should be proud of, because at the end of the day, sometimes folks talk about public school and they say it's good for those kids, but not good enough for their kids.
Right.
And so it's important to be able to make sure that it's good for all of us, because we're all neighbors and friends in the city, and we should be able to have a decent school and an education that our kids are able to receive. And so I'm proud of the work that they're doing, just again from across the board. So.
Right, and I've and having had a few opportunities to meet with Dr. Bedell and talk to him about his vision, he's the kind of guy that kind of makes you want to run through a brick wall sometimes. When he just he's a pretty inspiring guy. He's got an inspiring story, and I think he's putting that district in a good spot.
Yeah, and I share a lot in common. And as a matter of fact, I appreciate him so much because, again, when I talk about what is good for them versus for our own kids, he's someone who is walking the talk, and because his own kids actually even attend the schools, that he's the superintendent of, and that hasn't happened very often. Yeah, and I think his younger kids attend like Boulder Star or something.
Yeah, I think that's right.
So yeah, but I mean they're part of the district. He could probably have choose to send them to another district or so, but I mean
the optics might not have been great, but
but we've seen
cool
that
he's done
happen,
that.
in years past, type thing. So, but to make sure that it's good for, if it's good for the kids that I'm been the superintendent for, it's good enough for my kids, and for that, I applaud him and his family for their commitment to Kansas City. They've certainly have embraced our Kansas City community greatly, and I saw him at the movies the other day, seeing Black Panther.
What'd you think?
I thought it was great.
Yeah, it was pretty awesome.
I thought it was great, but it was cool to run into him, and we had a good conversation. And I was actually going into the movies as they were coming out, so
they were probably pretty excited then.
They were, and we all had on our attire that we decided we would wear. I didn't have any African attire, but I had a shirt that says "Black in America" that I received back in like 2006 or so, and so
I think I could turn this entire conversation into a Black Panther review, but I think maybe
I can talk about whatever you like.
Now that we got you in a room, right? You're with us. No,
we should do this more often.
Yeah, there we go.
This is called Jermaine Reed #1.
There we go.
Then we'll come back and do conversation with the councilman.
It'll be a recurring segment, right? Yeah.
Boom, there
you go. Well, let's shift gears now to your work at City Hall, and I appreciate the open discussion about KCPS and Black Panther, but one of the most recent items that you were able to push through in some capacity was the ban the box legislation. Can you maybe talk about why that was important for you and what that will do moving forward?
So in 2013, the city of Kansas City, Missouri, under my leadership, we adopted ban the box for city applications.
Right, for city employees.
And city employees. And so anyone, of course, that would come in, and it's interesting because people say, what is ban a box? It simply removes the question of if you have ever been convicted of a felony from an application. That's all it does.
It lets people
the question.
Essentially be judged on their merits.
Correct.
Right.
And that doesn't take away, and I think sometimes people think, oh, well, wait a minute, we're not going to do background checks. Yes, background checks actually still occur.
Right.
It just takes away that first phase of going in, filling out an application, and saying, I want to be able to apply for this job. And someone who has, some sort of conviction, that doesn't necessarily mean that they've been charged, or for wrongfully doing something. And sometimes, it could be some charge that's, nearly 5-10 years old that meant nothing. Perhaps a youngster doing something bad and got in trouble and it's still on your record.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't be able to go in and state what your record is, and then have the post-offer stage where they say, hey, we found these items in your background. Could you explain this one way or the other?
Right.
And then, of course, the employer can make that decision. So the city of Kansas City, Missouri in 2013 has been leading that path. And under my leadership, I felt it appropriate, along with Moore Square and several faith leaders in our community, to make sure that we could expand our efforts in ban the box. And so the policy, as I mentioned, just removing the criminal history question from application for employment and housing as well. We introduced it. It had several different co-sponsors from my colleagues on the city council, which I'm extremely grateful for. But we also understand that those who have criminal records, they suffer from discrimination in many areas of their life, if it's employment, if it's housing, education, social benefits, or whatever it might be. And so we wanted to make sure that we could remove it as employers in our entire city to give them a chance, and people that they represent a very good group of job seekers who already have contributed and added to our workforce. There's been a lot of research that actually even has shown that there is a direct correlation between recidivism and unemployment, and people who are employed, we know, are significantly less likely to be reoffenders from any of their problems. And so we wanted to do everything we possibly could to expand it, and thankfully a few weeks ago at City Hall it was approved, and so it will now be in place 6 months from now. So that's probably from when this was approved back earlier this year.
Right.
It would now actually, that was January the 25th.
Right.
Now, I remember correctly.
Yeah.
It was approved. So in 6 months, back in June, we'll fast forward to June.
Right.
This is when we will be able to see this go into full effect throughout the entire city. And so anyone that is going in to fill out an application, they will hopefully not have that question on their application,
Right.
even if they're applying for housing
Right.
as well.
It's kind
And
of
if
a
they
subconscious
experience
thing
it-
in a way too. If you see that box on a resume, you're not going to want, it might deter you from
Absolutely.
from applying for housing or for a job, saying, "Oh, this is going to come up
So-
right
so
away."
I would go so far to say that anyone that hasn't lived or who's lived with the silver spoon in their mouth, they wouldn't understand this.
Right.
Right. But if you have had some challenges one way or the other, you would understand that there is that stigma that is attached to going in and having to fill out that application and saying, "Look, they're not going to hire me anyway."
It's an anxiety inducer too, I think. Right? You walk in there and it's like they're not going to
hire me.
They won't hire me.
I'm going to go work at the local McDonald's, or
Right.
heck, I'm going to try to go down and work at this local firm that I heard was hiring.
Right.
I'm go over and apply at the local grocery store, but I got to check that box.
Right.
They're not going to hire me.
Right. There's got to be that concern.
People want to be productive citizens of our community, and we should allow them that opportunity.
Right, and I think what you hear, if you were at that meeting where it was discussed in committee, there's a lot of powerful testimony from people who maybe were incarcerated themselves or work with those who had been incarcerated, speaking to that point, right? There's no greater deterrent to violent crime than a job,
Yeah. And I would finally say, again, in the legislation, it does not prevent employers from considering past criminal crimes or previous convictions or of a crime directly related to a job function. We're not trying to advocate for someone who has been convicted of a sex crime or a sex offender to work at a daycare facility. We're just advocating for people to do and provide opportunities for those in our community who want to be able to return back into the community one way or the other and get a decent job so that they can be productive citizens in the city.
Right, perfect. And I also wanted to ask you about the Memorandum of Understanding with Edgemoor, which was even more recently passed by the council after, I guess I would categorize it a heated, I don't know if heated's the right word, but it was it was a substantial debate about that MOU. It seemed like there was a chance in December where, at least at one point, it was rejected, it came back in a different form. I think most agree that it's a little more substantial now than it was then even. But I wanted to ask you specifically, now that important milestone has been reached, can you talk about how much outside pressure was on the council as that vote closed in?
Well, you've asked a mouthful, so
I know that's a lot, right?
Let's try to maybe back up here and kind of go back to the final question that you just asked. So, I would characterize the discussion for the MOU among the city council as one has been very robust and something that requires a level of attention that that $1 billion project that it received a great level of attention from my peers, and I think that everyone on the city council should be applauded for their due diligence throughout this process. We are very clear in terms of the 75% of the city voters who sent us, I believe, a resounding mandate to say that we want to have a world-class airport for a world-class city.
Right.
And back in November of 2017, we heard that message loud and clear. And throughout that process, there are a number of sort of dotted, a number of I's that have to be dotted and T's that have to be crossed.
Sure. Due diligence.
Right. You can call that due diligence. And I can tell you, it makes me extremely proud to serve on the council with people who certainly did their due diligence. We don't always have to agree with each other, but I'm a strong subscriber of that we must talk with each other instead of at each other. And
Right.
when we're able to talk with each other, we're able to come up with solutions that are proactive instead of us being reactive. And so, of course, a couple of weeks ago, the council approving the MOU 8-5 and authorizing the city manager to start with the MOU with Edgemoor, which of course is a Baltimore-based company, for our Kansas City International Terminal Airport Modernization Project. I really think sends a very clear sign to us that the citizens of the city wanted the world-class airport, and they wanted it to be done in a manner that was transparent and that would make all of us proud. And so I don't necessarily think that this was one of a malicious intent or a bunch of outside pressure one way or the other. I think that all of us were from 6 areas of this city. So that's from the north to the south to the east to the west. And there's a number of constituents that we represent, over 500,000 people in Kansas City proper. And it's important that their voices and their concerns are actually heard. And so I do believe, though, that the yes, that in moving forward with this project means that it's yes to thousands more construction-related jobs. I believe that a yes means that there are tens of millions of dollars that will be created with new contracts. Yes to a big infusion of economic growth within our local economy. Yes to new employment opportunities for more people working in our neighborhoods, in our entire metro, south, east, north, west, as I mentioned before. And then the new momentum, of course, that it's going to continue to leverage to important city projects like our downtown convention hotel, or the expansion of the streetcar, or the rebuilding of neighborhoods and the community benefit agreements, and making it better for all of us in Kansas City to be more prosperous place to live, work, visit, and play.
Right. Was there ever a moment where you were concerned that the Edgemoor deal might fall through as it was presented?
I was always cautiously optimistic. And I don't think you ever walk into this situation on any issue that we have to deal with overly confident.
Right, you can't get
cocky. You have to convince 12 other people to agree with the things that you're working on, and you have 12 different, very boisterous, big personalities. And so how do you handle that is an important way to go forward. And so I've always, with every project, not just this one, and I've been on the council for 7 years, been very cautiously optimistic, approaching every thing that we have to deal with.
Well, you seem like someone who legitimately enjoys politics, and hopefully I'm not misrepresenting that, but I think back to the city's minimum wage debate from March 2017. There was this confusing vote on the ordinance. Mayor James initially thought it failed, And that left you and I, among others, scrambling to the city clerk's office to re-examine the video to make sure that it did indeed pass. It was kind of
That was called Fun Times.
fun times. Yeah, that's what it was kind of fun. It was sort of exciting.
It's a good trip down memory lane.
And you seem to kind of revel in that moment. But what is it besides helping people that draws you to politics?
Well, I think kind of as we started talking about earlier in our discussion today, from just growing up in this city, and this stuff sometimes makes me emotional, so I try not to go there. But,
feel free to if you need to.
But I mean, just growing up in this city and this community, I've been always active in all sectors of the city, and it's something that's always kind of drawn me to do what it is that I'm doing today. When I went off to college to the University of Missouri Columbia, I knew what I wanted to major in, and that was, of course, political science.
Right.
I have a master's degree in public administration, but most times people go off to college and they start picking a degree, and it's like, well, I think I'm going to do this.
Right.
Then I'm going to change. I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do that. I've always kind of been focused and driven, and but that's because of mentors that I've met along the way, my own personal family that have really helped. I think motivate my own personal drive and determination and the grit that I have every day to kind of get up and make a difference. And I'll never forget, people often ask me, well, what is one of your fondest memories of being on the city council? And if I were to ask you that question, what do you think I would say?
Well, now I feel like I'd be wrong if I said it, but
yeah, you're going to be. I can assure you.
I would say probably something like passing the GO bond stuff would be big. This airport MOU, I think, would have to be somewhere near the top. But tell me the answer.
People say Reed will lead, but that is not the answer.
Oh yeah.
My fondest memory of being on the city council has been walking in the World Series parade.
Oh right.
And this goes back to the core of your question, and that is the true essence of our city was, I think, seen from so many different levels that day that it will always stand out in my mind as one of the best days of my life. Because yes, while we were celebrating a World Series team and we had a nice World Series trophy, but it was that sense of community, that sense of helping your fellow brother, your fellow sister, that sense of pride that we had to be KC,
right.
Where everybody was walking around with KC on their shirt, everybody walking around and representing their neighborhood, and everybody walking around and slapping fives and kissing babies and having a good time and just celebrating.
Right.
But that sense of community is what drives me every single day to try to give what I possibly can to this city, my community that I was born and raised in.
Right.
And I want to continue to make that difference as much as as long as I possibly can.
Cool, good answer.
On the council or not on the council.
Right.
So.
Good answer, and I think plenty of Kansas Cityans would agree that day is among their favorite as well, because that was a pretty special moment. I also wanted to ask you about the sales tax that was approved by Kansas City, Missouri voters in April of 2017. That one is it's going to raise roughly $8.6 million annually over the next 10 years for projects on the east side. How would you like to see those funds spent if you had a magic wand with them?
Well, of course, there is a geographic area that the 1/8 cent sales tax is covering, and I believe that it is one in which we as a community should also have a sense of pride. I think that many individuals who live east of Truce feel like we're often forgotten, and I often cringe when I start hearing people refer to our communities as sides,
right.
Because with over
east side, west side,
we're not that. We are, when our neighborhoods are strong, when the Northeast is strong, when the folks in Southtown are strong, when the folks who live in Brookside are strong, when the folks who lived in Northland are strong. this entire damn city is strong. And excuse my language, but
That's all right.
that's how I feel. And so
We can handle it.
you can still use that too. You don't have to erase it. But back to the 1/8 cent sales tax. I mean, we will be able to see, and I think the importance of that comment is that the entire city had to vote on that.
Right.
And it's just like they did with the zoo, the tax for the zoo,
Sure.
several years ago. Everyone feels that there's a sense of ownership and being able to improve portions of our community that sometimes may not receive it. And so if I had a magic wand that I would wave, I would continue to make sure that we're investing, as we already are, along the Prospect corridor. Continue to make sure that we're investing in some of the neighborhoods that potentially will need some new housing and some other areas of our community. There's some new business growth that needs to continue happening. And so I think a number of things are taking place that we've got to continue to enhance. And over the next 10 years, when we look down the line, I'm hopeful that without naming specific projects,
It's probably smart.
which I don't want to do, which I'm avoiding, some folks will talk your ear off and won't say or
Right.
admit what they're doing.
Yeah,
But I'm pretty straightforward.
Yeah, I can respect that. At least you're admitting it.
And so, but I would hope that in 10 years, though, is that we'll say we're proud of the investment that we made with the 1/8 cent sales tax,
And
it has helped leverage even further since sales tax
Right.
in other ways in our city.
Right, and for those in the Northeast who think, well, that doesn't really affect me too much,
Yeah, it
actually, a
does.
portion of that
Yeah.
border goes all the way down to, I think, Independence and Prospect,
It does.
or close to that. So it does touch on the Northeast, and with that kind of money over a 10-year period, it's likely that the Northeast, especially as you mentioned, the Prospect corridor right there, goes through, it's the heart of the Northeast. It connects 18th and Vine to the sort of Northeast. So,
Well, and also, I mean, you got to keep in mind that our next work of what we're doing is, of course, trying to make sure that we have a Independence Max, and someone who has used the public transportation here in town. I'm intimately familiar with it, and so I know that how beneficial that will be along the Independence corridor.
cool. And I guess on a semi-related note, I wanted to ask about the status of some of the work being done in the historic 18th and Vine Jazz District. I know in October of 2017, the council approved a $225,000 cash infusion for the Jazz Museum to kind of help keep those doors open. I think you said at the time that you kind of spearheaded that in a lot of ways. It seemed like there was a memo that you passed around. You'd said that it was abundantly clear that business as usual is not sufficient related specifically to that. And an organizational review is currently underway with the results expected by May 1st. But do you have any updates on the status?
You
there?
know, I told you, listen, we're going to call your podcast today, Read Will Lead,
Yeah.
and this is phase one of the interview. We're going to have to come back and do more.
Right, I know. I'm asking
but-
big questions, I know.
Well, no, but I think the reality of it is that, again, these are all projects that I have worked diligently to make sure that we're enhancing. In the 18th and Vine area, I believe that it is, when we start asking what's next about our city, 18th and Vine is that. We could start talking about 1 light, 2 light, 3 light, what have you,
Right.
but I think we must be talking about the light that shines on 18th and Vine so bright across this entire world that all of us, when we start talking about Kansas City, it doesn't matter where you are. It doesn't matter where you are in the country. It doesn't matter where you are in this world. And if someone knows something about Kansas City, the first question they're going to ask you is, hey, something about 18th and Vine. Or they're going to think about that song, Going to Kansas City.
Or maybe they know about the Negro Leagues Museum.
They're going to know about baseball.
Right.
They're going to know about jazz, and they're definitely going to know about barbecue.
Right.
And so I consider it a very authentic piece of our Kansas City history. I feel like it is engraved in the fabric of who we are, and it's important that we not only preserve it, but we also enhance it. And so that's why the city's investment under my leadership in making sure that we could secure the $27 million for the project and trying to move it forward. We have aggressively been working through that in a phased approach. We are getting ready to approach the second phase of the project. The first phase, which was $7 million, and then the second phase, of course, which is $10 million. Those phases include a number of things, from the purchasing of property to the preservation of historic areas to making sure that we can make some improvements with our streetscapes along the corridor in the 18th and Vine area. And then, of course, with some of the over 32 businesses that we have in the area, being able to attract and also retain new businesses has been one of the key things that we've been working toward. And so you asked, of course, about the American Jazz Museum as well, and that we, of course, have a real piece of Kansas City history there. That is pretty much a city-owned museum,
right.
And
and it might literally become a city-owned museum, right?
Yeah.
As of May, depending on how this thing shakes out.
When the study is completed, we will review the recommendations and proceed accordingly to what has been recommended from us. Of course, some of their challenges over the past couple of years have been documented, certainly in print and media across the board. But I also think they serve as a real unique opportunity for us to really move the museum forward in a different direction. But I also think that even you think about the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum, heck, we're getting ready to celebrate 100 years of the signing of the Negro Leagues Baseball, which was signed right in the YMCA building there at Bedell. And so
the Buck O'Neill YMCA?
Yeah, Buck O'Neill YMCA. They signed that document 100 years ago to incorporate the game of baseball right there in that building. And so it's important that we, as a community, be sure to continue to embrace it. And it is one of 5 entertainment areas in this entire city, and it should be treated just the same, and it shouldn't be treated as a second-class museum or entertainment area in the city.
Oh, and I'll let you go here in a sec, I promise, but I think I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you about the potential impact there of the Urban Youth Academy.
Oh, man, yeah. Thank you.
The baseball fields for youth. I mean, that's huge.
$19 million of an investment, and let me say a huge thanks to the Kansas City Royals and Major League Baseball for their commitment to youth in our community. We are 1 of 7 in the entire country, and we will be offering free baseball to kids in our community for the next 20 years, free. All people have to do is take their kids down there and sign up. When those gates are open, take yourselves down there. And
it's a world-class facility. I mean, it's awesome.
Yeah. And so, I mean, you will be able to learn so many different aspects of the game of baseball. If you just want to be a bat boy, if you just want to learn how to hit appropriately or what have you, you'll be able to learn the game of baseball. And so I'm proud of what that will represent. I'm proud of the partnership that we have been able to forge as a city council with Mayor James's leadership, and really been one of the persons who have advocated greatly for the project, because the reality of it is that, as you've mentioned, it is going to really enhance what 18th and Vine actually is. And if you think about it, you go back to that history, and folks like Satchel Paige or Buck O'Neill or Jackie Robinson or any others who learned and perfected their game of baseball on those very fields where young people will be playing and learning. I believe that hollow ground that they're going to be on, those old players, and you're going to be able to feel it,
right? And
we're going to be able to have the next Jackie Robinson 100 years from now.
Right.
Start right there on 18th and Vine.
Cool. Well, hey, I appreciate your time. I think everybody's looking forward to that field, and I do appreciate you taking the time to sit down with me today. It was a cool conversation, so thanks for your time.
Look forward to it. I look forward to coming back for another conversation with the councilman.
All right, take it easy. You heard it there from 3rd District Councilman Jermaine Reed. Looks like he's eager and willing to come back and do another episode of Kansas City's Northeast Newscast. In the meantime, we'll keep plugging away on new episodes of the podcast, which you can find at northeastnews.net under our podcast tab. Once again, I'd like to thank everybody for listening and continuing to read all of our content about the historic Northeast and the community at large. Until next time, this is Paul Thompson, signing out.